Recording is in progress. So, official welcome to all of you today, and thanks for being here. Thanks for attending this TAAC Talk, and thanks in particular to C. Marquez. C. Marquez is joining us today. C, I am going to pin you when we get started in the conversation. C is a Taos artist. Their pronouns are they, them. And C is also a dear friend of mine, so I'm particularly excited to share more of our conversation with a broader community. And for those of you that don't know who the Taos Abstract Artist Collective, or TAAC, is, I will just read our mission statement. I eventually will memorize this, but I have not yet. So the Taos Abstract Artist Collective promotes abstract artists working in or near Taos, New Mexico, toward the exchange of ideas, new aesthetics, and creative concepts. Taos is synonymous with abstract thinking, with origins in indigenous geometries, transcendental and modernist movements, and conceptual and land art installation. Once the nexus for westward bound artists, Taos unleashes expansive abstract thinkers. And it is from this landscape that we produce TAAC Talks, exhibitions, panels, social mixers, kind of you name it. We are here for you, for the artist community. We intend to evolve organically. TAAC was founded initially by Carrie Bell, who is, I think, in transit right now and not on the screen, and Aaliyah Horline. And we have since expanded our group to include Lynette O'Kane. I see Lynette there. As a board member, as well as Bianca Goya and Paulina Ho, and we've become a team to just be able to do more, which has been wonderful. To that end, we would not be able to produce our TAAC Talks without the professional assistance of Mark Smith, who is our resident videographer and my partner, and really conceptualized this whole series in the way that it is unfolding, which is a little different than some artist talks that you may have participated in the past. So we have a short film that's pre-recorded and edited, and then we air that for all of you, and then we get to have a lovely conversation with our artist. So we'll have an opportunity to talk with C today. I am going to put Mark's website in the chat. Mark does a lot of work in the community, and if you have any video projects that you're curious about, please feel free to view his work and check him out there. And I will make other housekeeping notes at the end. I would like to also just put a word out that if you have, as an artist, your own exhibition coming up, or something in the community that you'd like us to share more broadly with our audience, we are always delighted to do that. You can put something in the chat today, you can announce it yourself, or you could email us and we could post it on social media. We're always delighted to do that. Our TAAC Talks are also available on YouTube. So let me grab that link for everybody and I'll pop that in the chat. As I mentioned, they're all archived. They're all archived. And so you can go back and view what we've done to date, which is really great. And if you don't have our regular website, I'm going to put it in there anyway, the Taos Abstract Artist Collective.com, you can stay up to date there, or on Instagram as well. And we're pretty active on our social media, so you can check us out there. So without further ado, we again are just simply delighted to welcome C. Marquez. They are based in Taos. They are a New Mexican tall tumble mustard installation and sculpture artist and natural pigments sketchbook keeper, which we will learn all about their wonderful process. And it was just a total delight to go to your studio, see work in progress and engage in a deeper conversation. And we don't always get that opportunity to do that, in the sort of milling about of day to day. So it was a real treat. And so we're going to watch the film together. It's a very, casual conversation following. And so if you have things that strike you as you're watching, or questions that pop up for C, or anything you'd like to share with the group, we'll have an opportunity to have a conversation after the film. And it's about 25 minutes. Is that right, Mark? 25, 30 minutes? Okay, so yeah, so bear with me while I mute myself and appropriately share my screen, and then we will get started. Okay, thanks everyone. Can everybody see the screen okay? Yes? I'm going to take that as a yes. November 4th, 2017. Can you tell me more about that date?
Yeah, that's funny to recall that. That was the date that I took the vow of monogamy with this plant as my sculptural material.
Yeah.
I had been working with it before then, but in combination with other materials, and it was not working out the way I wanted it to. It just seemed.
Well, what do you mean by that?
It just seemed like I was doing endless processes and experiments, and I was having a great time. I was having fun,
Yeah.
but it just didn't seem quite right. It didn't feel to me right either. And Harmony Hammond's the one that came in and said, pick the one thing that you want to work with and clear everything else away and just start with that. Yeah. So that's what I did. And I took everything off the table that I had been working on. I burned a bunch of it, and I came back to this and just started to deconstruct it and try to put it together in ways with just itself. So that's where I started working with tension and the strength of the plant itself, which it's very strong in points to hold itself together. Yeah.
Can we hold a piece up?
Oh, sure.
May I hold a piece?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's gorgeous.
It feels really nice. And you were smoothing the rougher edges earlier. And so could we talk about, and I will say the Latin name, Cicimbrium altissimum, the tall tumble mustard plant, which is really elegant. I mean, just you've used, I feel like in the works that I've seen, and I know you've talked about this, all parts of the plant. And that seems to be, that idea that there's not a part of it that's disposable or a part of it that, is wasted. And that feels really aligned with your philosophy, kind of ethos, just as a human being.
Right. That's part of my minimal way of being. It just also feels good to me to be simple and simplified. And so, yeah, and through the years since I've took that vow, I have found the different parts of the plant that I always experiment with how to put it together with itself in different ways. And you'll see some of the experiments hanging around. And that's a challenge for me. And I mean, a good challenge, because when you take everything else away and you work with one material, you actually, it feels more open to possibility than like it. To me, it's almost overwhelming to have every material at my disposal, because it's hard to make decisions. And with just honing in on one material, which comes with different parts and different thicknesses, different sizes. These are just little guys. There's a bunch more over here that are thicker, and like, it's really exciting when I find a piece of tumble plant that has grown really large, and people bring them to me sometimes. The ones in Santa Fe actually get a lot bigger. I worked with plants down there for a while, and that's just a different voice in the work too, to have all the different sizes and parts and pieces put together.
And then we have these smaller parts, right? And that you've really curated and are so delicate with each piece. I was commenting earlier that they reminded me of like artifacts or bones or wishbones, which are delicate and symbolic, and that feels very much connected to how you practice. And have you always practiced in that way? You've been an artist your whole life, but you went back to, you made a pivot and completed your MFA in 2018.
Yep.
You know, do you feel like that, you know, being very process oriented has always been a strong part of your artist identity, or has it been something that you've been leaning more into, either starting with your MFA or now or going forward?
I would say that I have always had a affinity for my hands on the materials.
Okay.
And I started as a graphic designer and package designer, and I worked on a computer for a lot of years. And so that was my undergrad. My BFA was in graphic design, and it's a different world. It's very stark. It's very exhausting. And at the time I was learning all the programs, and they were very new, Adobe Illustrator, you know, the desktop publishing things that were out then. And it's exciting when I had a life of material artistry, and then I went into that. I was like, cool, now I can just sit in a room with a computer and I can do anything. And that got old. Yeah. So I wanted to get, while I was doing that, my hands on other things. So I always worked in clay. I did printmaking, and those things, what I found myself doing were series of works. I also loved carving into both the clay and, you know, doing relief printmaking. Woodcut was my favorite. And so it all kind of came together. And doing series of work, trying to do, you know, series of vessels and series of prints. And I do love that numbered system. So
Numbers are featured prominently in your work.
Right, they're the titles of the sculpture. And on the 2D end, the sketchbook, they're numbered sequentially, and right now they started from, I think it was January 2019. Because I made a shift away from inks.
I see.
Like from acrylic ink. I did a
like
whole
commercial inks, you mean?
Like acrylic ink. And I use one ink pen now that's refillable. But I shifted to pigments that I made from the tumble plant, and also coffee and charcoal that come from my wood stove. So I try to be more like self-sustaining and making pigments from what is around me and what's part of my existence. Yeah, so the number system comes into the sculpture as well. And it's basically, the work is very impermanent. And to me, it has an infinite feel to it because of being connected to the earth, being from the earth, going back to the earth. There's a loop there. And this particular plant has probably been around a very long time and will be. So having that duality of the title adding up to the number 8, which to me means infinity. Every title does add up to 8. And I keep a list of what I've used already, which titles I've used. So I have a little check.
Log.
Yeah, I have a page of all the numbers. That's paired with the impermanence. So inherently they are impermanent. And to me, it just feels like a nice balance. Being a Gemini, I like the
Holding both.
duality of that.
Well, that's sort of interesting, right? Obviously, there's a dichotomy here, impermanence and infinity. When we think about the sort of how you're thinking about the intersection, and it can also potentially to somebody mean vastly different things.
Right, exactly.
That's the point.
They are, yeah. And it's kind of, for me, it brings me to an awareness of our time on Earth. And, you go along in your normal day and you think, oh, when is this day going to end? Or, it's like, oh, ticking time. And it's so brief. We're not here very long. And yet we have the ability to experience so many things and also give so many things and have an influence. So that's all part of the same beautiful package.
I hear the sort of duality again, the sort of making an impact and leaving no trace. Both of those things can be true at the same time.
I think that's fantastic if you can do that. Yeah, I mean, that's what I would strive to do.
Yeah.
So a lot of people speak to me about the emotional impact that the work has.
Okay.
Someone came up to the garden party just last night.
Yeah, no kidding.
And I love it when that happens, because that's my mission, is to have the emotion be the lasting.
What was their experience, as they were talking to you?
They just wanted to let me know that the piece that they saw in the minimalist show, that or both pieces, they spent a lot of time with it, and they just really were moved, and they just really enjoyed that feeling. And I talked about the meditative process of building it and installing it, and he was like, yeah, I resonated with that meditative process. I could feel it. And that's one of the most wonderful things about this work. And I credit the plant. It's so beautiful. And I take it apart very carefully and put it back together very carefully. So I want it to still remain itself, and impact people in the same way that it does when I just find one out walking and I'm just like, there it is, So that's been a recurring theme of what people have expressed as they feel comes from the work, and I really love that. So
it sounds like you're really speaking about this pretty sophisticated relationship that's evolving, that's durable and has longevity, and it's still evolving, which is a parallel process in many ways, I think, to how we have our own human relationships in the world. So, I've been to your studio, and I've seen plants appear, sort of seems almost like magically they appear, and then it sounds also like that you encounter them in your walks, and I know that just being out here is a big part of your practice too. And so sort of how you source the material is interesting and really different than how a lot of artists think about sourcing material. There's some spontaneity that's sort of built in, it feels like, or maybe that's not the right word, but how would you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel it's sort of, lucky, that this plant was coming up and accumulating in the corner of my front door area as long as I've been here. And oftentimes I'd had to kick like a bunch of them out of the way to get in the front door. And, my previous dog was very furry, and they would come in on his fur, and so it was hard to it was trying to tell me something. I firmly believe so I brought it, that's why I brought it in and started working with it. And then I worked with it with other materials, which didn't pan out. And there was this whole series of things that we went through together, and finally we landed on where we are now. And other plants have shown up as well. And it's just not the same though. I'm just gonna stick with this one. So I'm a kind of person that likes, when I settle on something, I want to be able to count on it. And a lot of materials in the art world, they change the formulation, they become less available, and
or they degrade in other ways.
Yeah, you don't use them in time. Yeah, and then you have this bulk of things that maybe they're still good, maybe they aren't. And will you use them? Should you hold on to them? And I through grad school, I was getting through that process of honing in on one material and getting rid of the other materials. And it's very freeing, and it feels a lot, it's more intimate. And I think I've mentioned that having a little material family that I can count on. I drink coffee every day, so I'm going to have coffee remnants to work with for my pigments. I build a fire in the winter. I have plenty of charcoal for, making black pigment. And this plant comes rolling around. And then I found out, as soon as I made that commitment, there was I had sort of paid attention to their presence the 4 years prior of landing in this particular spot. Mm-hmm. But then I was really paying attention because I made this monogamous vow, which was supposed to be only 1 year. And
oh, really?
Yeah, I was taking it for 1 year.
6 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then that was the drought year. They didn't come up. We didn't have any the next year. So I was like, oh, sure. Now I made this vow, and now this material doesn't exist anymore. That was part of my whole thing, was to
what did you do?
have it be counted on. I started working very more carefully with the material that I did have.
So conservation.
Yeah, and you can see some of my earlier works are really material heavy, and then they have gotten lighter. Mm-hmm. And then I did more research about the plant and how seeds can remain dormant for decades. So they wait for the right conditions. And because I got nervous, oh no, global warming, this is gone. And no, it's not necessarily true. Okay. Of course, it's going to be still dicey, but it's not all or none, which is often where I fall on things. So the drought happened, and I conserved, and never so happy to see their little flowers again when they did come back. But someone asked me when I was nearing the end of the year, what are you going to do now? And it was easy to say, I believe I'll probably work with this for the rest of my life. So that's easy to say, yeah.
Does it provide comfort to say that? Because you called it a challenge, and here we are with duality again, right?
Yeah.
So
it does.
Yeah.
It, feels my purpose is clear with this, and just the amount of untried things and unpursued ideas. I have a sculpture sketchbook that I keep a lot of ideas in, so I don't know that I'm going to run out of things to do. So I haven't yet. So
it's a pretty good feeling, I think.
Right.
To feel,
probably ceramicists feel the same way. They're devoted to one material. Same with woodworkers,
Yeah.
So it's, and painters. It's just, this is my material that I work with, and it just has it feeds me in a different way of, putting things together and finding systems and repetitive processes to work together.
The systems piece is something that I noticed you writing about, the sort of biotic grid, the structures that we can find in cellular constructs or in you know, in constellation form. And so that, you know, that's, again, more relationships that seem to be emerging. And then also, you know, you have such a, it feels like a intensely personal, kind of intimate relationship with the plant. And then as I say that, I'm kind of reflecting on one of the pieces that you had in our Viewpoint Minimalism in Taos, New Mexico show, which we were delighted to show two of your installed works. And one of the works, the 1457 work, invited others to actually physically touch your work. So that seems really generous to be able to share this relationship with a public, potentially people who have no conception of what the intensity and depth of your relationship with the material is. And so that, to me, as we installed the work and had the show up for some time and watching people interact with it, was very striking to me. That felt very kind of generous of spirit and generous of creativity to open an invitation to others to have their own relationship with the plant.
Yeah, that was actually a really sweet result of that, because a lot of people want to touch the work all the time. And so
we had also signs that said, please do not touch.
On the other piece that was supposed to
Gathering.
not be touchable. So I wanted to provide something that people could actually touch and then have it be part of the piece. And part of the piece was for it to be sort of worn down and taken, you know, kind of rubbed out of pieces out of it, and show the impact that our touch, even gentle, can have on the natural materials. But, you know, also I do get to touch this and work with this every day, and not everyone does. And like, to get those pieces, there's a whole process you have to do to release them from the plant. It's not as simple as you would think, because I had to figure it out. There's a way to take it out that doesn't crack it in half, because oftentimes it could just, it's brittle, it would just break in half. And then to find the strength of going in on end into the wall. So the process of putting 1,457 of them into the wall for someone to come in and just be able to touch, it was my honor to do that, you know, and to have people want to touch it. So, yeah.
I know that piece has a lot of symbolism embedded in it. I don't know if that's something that you want to get into at all or not, but you can if you want to.
On levels, there's definitely a deeper meaning to all of the work that I do. And I sort of, the titles are vague. I know that they're numbers, but they all mean something. And that particular one, there's a light globe shape in where some of the pieces are not filling in the points that are on a grid. So I worked really hard to get that, you know, out of a grid. It's sort of like, you know, dot matrix or something. And the point of it was speaking to our existence as sort of obliterating our globe. And, you know, it's maybe harsh to say, but the 1457 is actually a year that mass production of printing presses there was a big shift in the printed material that was available on Earth. And it was astoundingly more after the Gutenberg press was invented and started into production. So that was a lot of material use, a lot of natural material use, a lot of byproduct, a lot of pollution, if you will. So I just chose that date. It meant something to me, and in those ways, and sort of a landmark of what was to come. or a
Sure,
threshold
everything
to cross.
changed,
Yeah.
right? There's sort of the before and then after, and everything completely shifted.
Yeah, it went from thousands of reproduced books to millions, and yeah. So yeah, each of the works has a little bit of a deeper story.
Sure.
If you want to know, then we can have a conversation. But
I always want to know.
I don't always put it all out
Yeah.
there because it's sometimes controversial, and it's also a way of me having a soft voice on things that don't always, you know, maybe we can get to that reason why if we want to, but you can also enjoy the piece for what it is and just take it as a experience. And I don't always like to tell everything about it anyway, because people can make up their own ideas around what it is, what they envision
Well,
it
they
is.
will anyway, right?
They do,
As an
yeah.
artist, right?
And they do, like, definitely for the 2D works, the
Yeah.
drawings, which are also abstract. So
Yeah, I think that's a nice segue as we're talking about printing, and we're obviously talking about paper. And one of the things that I know that you've been working on a lot lately is baking paper, and it's still sort of this ongoing curiosity with material and kind of experimentation laboratory, but in like holistic laboratory. And we have some of your homemade sketchbooks right here, and that feels like a very stark contrast to the Gutenberg press.
yeah, well, right. I had moved away from mass-produced, tree paper
Right.
sketchbooks, which are lovely and I used for many years,
Sure.
and moved into sketchbooks that I found were made from the byproducts of the clothing industry, remnants of clothing, or from a renewable plant that was easily grown and made paper out of. But I really wanted to make it for myself with the things from my life. Like I do, this shows up with the pigments, and so I experimented. I took a self-residency, I remember, where I just sort of took everything off my calendar for a week and set myself up to be able to experiment with the paper. And I worked from all my junk mail that comes, because it just comes to me, and I have to handle it and do something with it. And it's not a ton, but it's enough. And I found out that I could blend it up and make paper out of it. And there were certain aspects that I liked about it and some that I added to. I've recently started adding my dryer lint and my dog hair, and I like where it's going, and I like the different textures and the different strengths that I get. So that feels really good, like to be able to make my own paper. That's, again, self-sufficiency, that, being like living where we live, aspiring for off-grid, wanting to keep as small a footprint as I can. Those are the things that are important to me, and I want my art process to acknowledge that and also be a part of that. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing your work and life and philosophy with us here today, and it's really an honor to be in the studio and to be in this place with you.
Thanks for coming.
Okay. That was wonderful to see. Thanks again, C, and thank you, Mark. I'm going to pin you and put a spotlight so folks can, I'm going to see if I can do this skillfully, which might be challenging. I'm going to pin myself as well. And okay. Actually, I'm going to redirect myself and pause there. So again, thanks everybody for tuning in, and for those of you that joined us while we were watching the film, we're here today with C. Marquez. They are a Taos, New Mexican tall tumble mustard installation and sculpture artist and natural pigments sketchbook keeper. I love that. I love saying that. And C, I want to offer the opportunity for you to, just respond to the video and say anything to get us started. And then we will open up our conversation to questions, comments, what you're struck by, etc.
Well, first, I'd just love to give so much thanks to Mark, because that was quite a project and so fun to see it evolve. And I'm astounded by the work, and thank you so much. So that's what's most striking to me about being in part of this process. And of course, Lauren, your interviewing friend conversation skills were really gentle and put me at ease. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate being here. I know it's a long time coming. We talked about doing this, I think, a year ago, and we did it. So here we are. It's just a real pleasure to have a little bit of that captured on film. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
But yeah, anybody have any questions?
Yeah, do folks have questions or comments? I mean, I was only there for a portion of the filming, so I wasn't there for the drone landscape filming, which was epic to see the sort of aerial view. I mean, I know, many of us live here, but that just to see you in your environment, interacting with the material before it comes into the studio is really something that struck me. And there's a sort of an elegance to just even being able to be in an environment that's so vast like that. So that was something that I was struck by. But yeah, I wonder if other folks have any comments or questions. Yeah, Lynette, please jump in.
I see.
I
So I understand and appreciate the way you've described your relationship with this plant, which I, in my way, almost see as an animistic relationship. For me, the works also have another partner, which is light. And I'm wondering if you consider yourself to have a relationship with light, or if the light is simply something that kind of happens to that relationship and you just allow it to happen. Or some other meaning.
Well, absolutely. Living here, we all know the light, it's magical. And in fact, Mark and I were trying to pin down to do the outside shooting. We wanted to be in that magic light, and it was hot for days, and we were trying to also have it be cooler, but it's just very special here. And there's certain places I've been where it is something that I look forward to every day, like when that light changes. So I pay attention to it, and I live by the light. Being out here, there aren't any street lights or any kind of artificial lights, and so I found myself following the light, waking up with it, going to bed with it when it vanishes. And I love that way of being in sync with it. So, and when I first started working with these plant pieces and putting them in the studio wall, it was winter, it was November. And so the light was low and it was coming in pretty horizontal at that time. And the shadows were just incredible. If you see any plant outside casting a shadow, you can, attest to that. But to have it inside on the wall and changing throughout the day, that's something I wanted to capture. And you really can't capture it because the sunlight is different than any artificial light. But I do my best to think about the shadow of the work when it's being made and how it's going to show when it's being shown, because it's a part of it for sure.
Yeah. Do you try and manipulate the way it's exhibited, the way the light shines on?
Yeah, it's hard for me to put more than one light on most pieces. Some of them are very large, and so they have to have more than one light. But I try to minimize like one part of it having multiple shadows if I can. And so that's tricky, but it's that I wrote about that a little bit too, that same but different aspect that that shows up in my work. So
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lynette, and thanks, C. We got to really see that exhibited in the minimalist show. There was a perfect moment where the golden light coming through and striking the wall. That was really special.
Yeah, that's happened a few times when I've had works up in galleries and in places that unexpectedly, like I didn't know there was going to be a patch of sunlight coming through at a certain time. So it's a nice surprise when that happens. I don't plan that, but it's always lovely and it's magical. It's like people like stop and exclaim because it's just like this magic light being shined, not on the whole piece, but just on enough to really, really see, what you're looking at. So.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions that folks are having? You can feel free to also pop things in our chat as well, if you'd prefer. Yeah, Tom, go ahead.
Love hearing you talk about your work, Krista. It was really wonderful. And Mark's work is wonderful too. That enabled us to see and hear you. I'm really impressed with your relationship, the relationship you've committed with this plant. And I'm curious, the year that there was no tumble plant, the previous months, do you see this plant growing when you're walking out in the sagebrush? Can you spot the young ones?
Oh yeah.
And so the year that there were none, or there were very few, were you ready for that? Did you see that they weren't all over in the sagebrush? And did you not? And now do you notice it now that you had that one season?
It's like I'm anticipating it every time the season comes for them to start sprouting out. And it's something that I get excited about. I know what their initial greenery looks like. It doesn't look anything like the rest of the plant. It actually looks a little bit like the start of a dandelion, or it's also related to the arugula family. So it has this broad sawtooth leaf, flat, and I get excited when I see that, and I try to protect them. So yeah, that year when it didn't come up, it was really fascinating. I was working on a project for this show in Albuquerque at 516 Gallery that was called Species in Peril. And we were having meetings in the winter and talking about what we're going to be doing. And I was devastated. I was like, we're having a show about these species in peril, which are plants and animals. And now the species that I've chosen to work solely with is not coming up. And that sort of resonated with all of what was going on in a sad way. But, I found out it's a lot more durable than just missing 1 year. It's smart. So I get very protective of it now when I see little seedlings growing, or I don't think we've missed a year since then. I know that the drought it wasn't just 1 year, but it was just 1 year where it was notably wildflowers were not growing. So, and this is a wildflower, so that's a sad thing when we don't get our wildflowers.
The part I'm a real plant person. I love plants, and I walk out on the mesa as I see you doing in the video. Is this the flower stalk of this plant? In other words, it's their foliage down on the ground? Because I haven't found these. I see the skeletons, but I haven't been able to identify the plant. Is there a little yellow flower?
Yes, little yellow flower, tiny yellow flower. So they look essentially the same. They grow to the size almost that they're going to be when they're like you said, the skeleton when they're dried. But in the green stage, they're they have little flowers at the ends of the top, sort of the crown, and the broadleafs that start in the bottom die away as the shoot gets taller and the flowers come up. So that, you know, if you can imagine what it looks like in its dried stage, it's it just has more, it's green and it has flowers on the end. So they're very small. It's a mustard plant, tall tumble mustard. So it has mustard seeds. Yeah.
Thanks.
Beautiful work, very beautiful.
Are there other questions or comments from folks who are tuning in? Mark has a question, comment.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, it was really special to do this together, see, and I really enjoyed it, and
I did too.
got such as with all the people that I have been working documenting, it's always just such a illuminating event, because it's sort of, a real deep dive into how people are doing their work. And I guess I have an observation, one which seemed really kind of simple, but when you said in the video, I think initially when I saw your work, I thought, well, gosh, to just kind of continually concentrate on this, that seems really, really specific. And then you said in the video something that just was perfectly obvious, which is, a woodworker chooses wood and they work with wood for their whole lives. And then likewise, fine artists do that. And so it was sort of just a kind of like, yeah, obviously that makes total sense. And so you've chosen this. And so anyway, that was kind of a thing in my brain that was just sort of a little light bulb. And then I guess my own just gut reaction to the work is that it has sort of a kind of prehistoric like element to it for me. And it makes me think of multiple things. It makes me think of like basket weaving. It makes me think of like petroglyphs, sculpture. So lots of elements. And I wonder whether those things, whether those things sort of translate for you, or do you have other things in mind as you're assembling or conceiving of a piece?
It's kind of like what Lauren pointed out, the feeling of bones or something. I found when I'm taking a look at a plan or I'm putting together a new like unit that will be repeated, I'm trying to find that unit to repeat or to tie together to itself in a way. They are very bone-like, and you'll see like the same shapes again and again across all of the plants, no matter what their size. There's one of the shots in the video has like a 3-prong little piece with another piece coming out of it, and that's just their system, how they grow. And so I'm trying to capture that and use those in my own construction ways, so that it's like using the ways that it grows instead of just like chopping it all apart and putting it all back together, which I've also done. So that's my current focus, is to try to really find those pieces that are inherent to the plant and how it grows, and use that to build in a way. And then sometimes when I'm doing that, I find a little light bulb moment where I'm like, oh, if I do this and this, it can keep going, and it can keep connecting to itself. But sometimes when I'm working on pieces, and putting things together, I do use tension, and I don't use glue or any kind of wire, hardware or anything. So I do feel a little bit like if I could imagine what like an electrician felt like. I've done minor electrician work, but there's a lot of that putting together and like checking the tightness I installed some lights recently, and I had to put those little nuts on them, and you have to get it just right, otherwise they fall out. And that's exactly what I'm doing all the time, putting these together, and I can test it. And if it doesn't feel like it's gonna stay, I pull it out and I do something else. And it can be a really strong hold. It's fun to find those places where it can hold together really strong, and using its own there are different ways I have of putting like sort of collaring things to make them tighter and things like that. So that's what is most intriguing to me, is finding those ways to put things together and keep finding new ways that are stronger and like dependable connections. So
Mark, you're muted.
And as a follow-up, was there like a moment where you talked about, or at the beginning, about having experimented with it and with different with other materials sort of in concert, but then was there a moment where you sort of realized that it's the power of the installations is the repetition of it all, and the scale, and so was there a moment where you realized or felt that the piece by itself was interesting, but then to replicate it and to expand it became an entire, was there a moment where that sort of occurred, and or were you just sort of
right.
growing them organically?
No,
So
that was pretty much the initial moment. I had been working on it was actually my thesis project for grad school, and I like I said in the film, I was using that material in conjunction with other materials and other adhesives, and like I was using wheat paste and things like that, which I still use in my sketchbook, but not to put the sculptures together. And when I took everything away and I made this one single form, like pretty quickly and pretty easily, I had been working in series of pieces, like repetition, when I was doing the multiple material study. So when I got to working with just the tumble plant and I made this form, I knew I was going to repeat it. And then it was just a matter of what does it look like? And then the shadows happen, and I was just off and running. And the best thing about that is because it's a plant and it's not an industrialized material that it's not like a dowel or something.
right.
Like the one piece behind me, every unit is different from the other, and there's something about that, the repetitiveness, but the individuality that you can see. So I think it's intriguing to look at, because you're not like, oh yeah, I got it, I see one, I see it 150 or 1457. They are all different, and I love that.
They're very satisfying to look at.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, C. Are there other comments? If not, I had a kind of a reflection that popped up as you were speaking, which was really kind of the metaphor of sustainability, which obviously is, infused throughout your entire practice in the way that you live as well. But this idea that, we can at any point consider ourselves to be our own kind of natural renewable resource, like as humans. Maybe that's the art therapist in me coming through a little bit, but I think about sustainability across the board, and that's that idea that there's such a parallel between using the single material and having this monogamous relationship with the material, and then also being really true to yourself, and having you yourself as a resource, which to me feels sort of poetic in a way. So it's not really a question, it's just an observation that popped up.
Yeah, I mean, I was just having a conversation yesterday about that. This leads me to what you're saying, leads me to think about this, being our own resource. I mean, I'm learning this material and I'm learning how to work with it, and it's something I could probably teach. it's been a love affair to discover the way that I put things together. And I forget that not everybody knows that or knows what is involved. And so there's this question of like, well, would you have to be the one to install every piece as it goes out in the world? And, I have a mixed answer for that. I have had it be installed by other people, and I have shipped work and had it be installed, but only certain ones. Not like some of the works are really carefully installed and carefully put together. And in fact, some of my diagrams for how to put them together, I make them so that I don't forget, and they're probably impossible to read for other people. So I don't know if you saw that one with the sort of poles coming out of the wall and then these sort of chains connecting them. That the diagram of that is intense, and it would be fun to see if anyone else could put that together, because I have to keep checking the diagram, otherwise I get confused too. But I love that. It's like a puzzle. So anyway, I am a resource to the work in a way. So yeah.
Had the pleasure of reading your graduate thesis, and you did your MFA at the Vermont College of Fine Arts, and have in a sense, this full-time sculpture commitment to sculpture and works on paper has been since 2018, and you had a long career in graphic design. And I appreciate when we have these opportunities to do deep dives and focus and kind of refocus and pivot. And we always I think we always have that opportunity in life to press pause, essentially, or to kind of hone in. And we don't always give ourselves permission to do that. That's another thing, but it's available, right, to be able to do that if we can be super intentional. And one of the things that we didn't talk about too much in the film, but that features prominently throughout your experiences, and you've had so many experiences. You've shown broadly, you've taught, you've been a faculty member at UNM, you've been an art educator for years in various capacities, but artist residencies, and you mentioned self-residencies. And so I just wonder if you could speak to, your relationship to the artist residency, and then, also maybe adjacently to the self-residency.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's important. I think that it's always been something I've done, even when I didn't know to call it a self-residency, to take time for myself, to remove myself from my everyday life and be quiet with the work and take what I can to just be with the work. And I've done a number of residencies where they're set up to house me or to have a project to work on, and there's just a specificity of purpose and a clarity and a focus that I do not get even where I live out of town, and really simply, like, it's still life is life, and it's lovely and it's wonderful, but then taking a moment and taking time away, whether it's a few days or a month or longer, it always renews me. It's like it gets my batteries charged up, and I know exactly what I'm going to do when I come back, and then I can set to work doing it, and I love that. That's just an amazing feature that happens. So yeah, and the self-residency, the one I spoke about in the film, I did here, which I hadn't really done before, and it was pretty amazing. Because when I go away for residency, there's a lot of prep. It's kind of stressful getting out the door, and then you land and you have to get your bearings. And for being here, I was just like, I could take that same energy and know my surroundings and have my dog and all the good things. And it's just a challenge that I like to give myself. And I just did that, a very short self-residency backpacking up to the Bull of the Woods yurt for a few days. And I like the physical challenge of trying to figure out, like, number one, how much can I carry? What do I take with me? How do I feed myself? And what do I want to work on? And when I got up there and everything was everything was out of my out of my way, out of my view. That was all I had. I had the work, and I had take care of myself. And I just think it's really important. So I highly recommend it if anyone is interested in that. Just even take a weekend. It's going to make a difference. Yeah.
Thanks, C.
Yeah.
Your comments or questions? Might have time for one or two more comments. I hope that folks have an opportunity to see your work in person. We were so fortunate to be able to install your sculptural works in the Minimalist show, and to have so many people interact with your work. And I think it was Paulina actually in the clip touching.
Yeah.
That was cute.
Was
Paulina, touching the work, but that there's everybody who is welcome to, with that work specifically, to engage. And we had to give specific instructions to the TCA to not sweep things up, to really let the installation sort of breathe, so to speak, and sort of be whatever it's going to be. And we don't always do that in the art world. Frequently we don't. The art world is kind of the opposite of that, and it's very structured, and we have our sort of rules of engagement with our materials, and not to say that there aren't rules of engagement with your relationship to this material, but in the actual structural installation, there was a lot of freedom and a lot of room for interpretation, which I think people really responded to. People really were entranced by.
I do. I love that element, and I love it when there's something outside of the box of what's normal, and people, it's a little bit invigorating to the whole white wall atmosphere. I feel like at times can be, and I love having the natural materials on the white walls. It's just another way of sort of queering the material, queering the aesthetic, queering the model, that we've grown used to. So that's something I strive to do, to sort of get us outside of the box a little bit. I mean, we have the spring show coming up, and I have a piece in that, and it's going to be outside of the box too, because it's unframed, it's a drawing, and I start to feel like even the drawings, I don't want to box them in. I don't want to fence them in. I don't want them behind glass, even though, that's safer. It's more protective. So I find other ways to display them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're looking forward to having your piece in our spring show. And that's a nice segue into, a little announcement at the end. And I want to make space to, if anyone else has anything they'd like to say or put in the chat, feel free to. But I also want to give folks C's website. So let me do that. I don't know if I did that before, but if not, I will do that now.
Do that in the Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, so you can find C's work.
Yeah.
There we go.
There's links to all that on the website. Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll be able to direct yourselves to their Instagram and Facebook and any upcoming projects. And we're so fortunate to be in community with you and your process and your practice. And that's a big part of what TAAC is about, really learning about each other as artists and creating safer spaces for people to show their work and themselves on their terms. And I value that quite a bit. So thank you again, C, for being willing to have a talk and to be generous with your studio, which is also your home. So that's, that's a thing when we get to go to somebody's home and actually see them living along and breathing and, working right alongside their material and their process. It's significant. So thank you for that opportunity, and thanks to folks for tuning in. It's been wonderful.
Well, thank you for starting up TAAC and the other co-founders, and as the team grows, it's very exciting to see what's happening in this organization, and Mark is a huge part of it. Thank you so much for all the hard work, and I'm really glad you guys made your way here when you did.
We're glad too.
Yeah,
And on that note, yeah, a lot of you have are familiar with TAAC and have shown with us in the past, and we're getting started. We got our nonprofit status this year, and we put our call out for artists to participate in, we do a big community show annually. Last year we had 62 exhibiting artists. This year we had 147 artists that responded to our call. So we pivoted and we created 2 shows, a fall exhibition, and a spring exhibition. C's work will be in our spring exhibition, which will be from April 12th through the 21st, in conjunction with Taos Spring Arts Festival, which is exciting. And our fall show, which is coming up in a few weeks, is going to be at the Stables Gallery, and it's going to be from October 13th through 21st. And the opening is on Friday, October 13th from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. And then we'll have the gallery open throughout that week to the public, and folks can pop in and meet some of the artists who will be gallery sitting. And so I just invite all of you to come and to see all of the wonderful works. We will be launching our catalog. It's one of the things that we do, is we feel as artists, as TAAC is sort of by artists for artists, we are really particular about how art is represented and how artists are represented. And so that's something that's very important to us. So we create a catalog to honor all of the artists. And so the catalog will be available for pre-sale starting tomorrow, and it will also be available in person. So that's a nice opportunity for folks to continue to participate, in a way for us to honor the legacy and history of Taos, this place. So stay tuned. And as always, reach out to us if you have your own shows or exhibitions or programs or projects that you'd like us to give a shout out to. We are always super happy to do that. So thank you again, everybody. Wish you a peaceful evening. Thank you for being here. Thanks for carving out time. Thank you, C. Thank you, Mark. And we will see you hopefully all if you're local, and even if you're not, come to Taos. We're friendly. On October 13th for our opening reception for the first of 2 shows in 2023 and 2024. So thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks. Bye.